This here is a box of deep crankbaits. One of my favorite lures to throw, and definitely one of the biggest one of my favorite lures to throw, and definitely one of the biggest fish catchers for a lot of anglers across the country, especially throughout the summertime. Now, you've seen pro anglers on Elite Series, Major League Fishing, FLW, throwing big crankbaits, catching giant bass, KVD getting an 8XD hook stuck in his hand. A lot of cool action can happen with deep crankbaits, and a lot of big bass can be caught. But one big misconception that I want to talk about in this video is that deep crankbaits are only for the summertime. People think that deep crankbaits are only for ledges on Lake Guntersville and only from May to September. But that is definitely incorrect. They can be used at all times of the year. And right now I'm gonna talk about the early spring and how you can effectively use deep crankbaits to your advantage to catch big bass. Let's talk about it. Well, how's it going, everybody? My name is Tyler Anderson. It is good to have you guys back here on the channel once again. If you guys love bass fishing, you have found the right channel. Make sure you guys have those notifications turned on and you are subscribed to be a part of Team TRF. But today we're gonna talk about deep crankbaits. Now, I just made a video, I think it was 4 or 5 videos ago, about shallow diving crankbaits such as the Strike King Series 3 right here, the Series 3 crankbait. I talked about the Series 4, even kind of dabbled into the deeper diving square bill crankbaits. But one thing that I want to discuss today is the deep diving crankbait. Now, I've made videos on deep diving cranks on Lake Guntersville in the summertime, an incredible place to deep crank, and definitely not the only place. You can deep crank all across the country. But deep crankbaits are usually thought of as a ledge bait, as an offshore type bait, and while that can be true for a lot of those lakes out there, it is not just delegated for the summertime, and especially here in Texas, we have a lot of scenarios in the winter and early spring in which a deep crankbait can really become an effective bait to catch big bass. So make sure you guys stick around to the end. I'll have a few fish catches and one huge surprise fish catch that you guys can see a preview of right here. Come on. But that's all you guys get to see. You have to stick around to the end to see that big fish catch that I caught on a deep crankbait, actually on a 5XD, as we'll talk about. And so deep crankbaits in general, if you guys are unaware what they are a crankbait that goes deep. I'm smart like that. But they are a crankbait that physically cannot be thrown shallow without dredging up the bottom with the bill. This here is the Strike King 10XD. It is meant to be thrown anywhere from 20 to 30 feet of water, depending on your line size. And they just catch big fish. They are also not just a largemouth or smallmouth catcher. They can be a drum catcher. They can be, I know people use deep crankbaits on jetties for saltwater fishing. They're definitely a very diverse lure, and they take specific gear to throw, which we'll talk about. But I want to talk about why I throw deep crankbaits in a certain scenario in the wintertime, and that is this scenario right here. Or should I say winter transitioning into the springtime, like that early spring, when the weather is finally getting a little bit warmer, but you still have to wear, you know, a sweatshirt and pants. It's almost there. You feel spawn coming, but you still have a few cold fronts still running through. So right now, that is this time in Texas, early February. But for you guys around the country, it may be a different time of the year. I'm just talking about your early springtime, like just after winter has transitioned. And so I'm going to talk about one scenario in which I use a deep crankbait over everything else. And that is when you have a warming trend, but you have overcast and nasty weather. With the conditions like we have today, where those fish in the wintertime are suspended out in the middle of the lake, they're on the main lake points, they're not really though sitting close to any sort of structure. If they are around rock, they're going to be suspended a little bit off the rock, unless of course we have sun, and the sun is going to warm up those rocks, they'll get a little bit shallower. But what I'm talking about today is a warming trend that happened. We had 3 or 4 days of warm weather this whole week, then we had kind of a little bit of a cold front last night, and then cloudy and super windy. Now, the reason why this scenario dictates the use of a deep crankbait is because it fits exactly where those fish are sitting at. Those fish have come off of the main lake. They're starting to make their way onto, you know, really sitting on the main lake points, those flats on secondary points kind of leading into spawning areas. The fish kind of got up on that, especially in a rocky area, when the sun warmed it up for a few days. And then as soon as we had a tiny little cold snap, those fish don't really want to move all the way back out to their winter haunts where they were sitting, and a deep crankbait fits that situation perfectly. You know, those fish were sitting in about 6 to 8 feet of water, I'm guessing, a few days ago, and now they have slid out to that 10 to 15 range, some suspending, some sitting on the bottom, just waiting for that water up shallow to get warm again so they can once again move shallow, start feeding, and start getting ready to spawn. So hopefully that made sense to you guys. I know that I have a tendency to ramble in these videos, but like I said, those fish are so close to getting ready to move up shallow, but of course we have cloudy conditions which kind of spread those fish out a little bit, and a deep crankbait is a great way to catch them. You don't have to have a ledge, you don't have to have current to throw a deep crankbait like you do in the summer oftentimes. You can throw it just on a normal bluff wall. You can throw it on a main lake point. You can even throw it on a super flat sand flat like this that has maybe a shell bed or a rock point underneath the water that you can find on your electronics. Those are great places to throw a deep crankbait that you might not have initially thought of. Now, when I'm talking about deep crankbaits, I'm talking about anything from the 5XD to the 10XD. So these are, if I can stinking get it out of here. This here is a striking 5XD, this here is a 10XD. This has a max depth of, like I said, about 30 feet if you have 10-pound fluorocarbon, maybe 27. I don't know if I've ever gotten to 30, but they say it can. And this is the 5XD, so on a good day, you're probably getting 15, 16 feet out of this. So anywhere in between 5, 6, 8, and 10 XD is kind of the range. I tend to throw the 5 and the 6 a ton. I don't throw the 8 a whole lot, because if those fish have slid off that deep here in the late winter, early spring, I think it's more effective to catch those fish on you know, a Carolina rig or an Alabama rig or something like that. That is a little more effective in getting deeper, but also staying slow, because it is hard to deep crank very, very slowly. Not a whole lot of companies make 5-speed gear ratio reels anymore. I personally don't even own any, because I don't really want to throw a crankbait that deep, that slow. I'm a power fisherman. If I'm deep cranking, I'm usually reeling my 6-4-1 as slow as I can, but it's definitely a little bit faster of a deep crankbait mood than most people throw it in. So the combo that I have usually thrown a deep crankbait on, I'm talking the 5XD to the 8. I usually don't throw a 10 on this combo. I usually throw a little bit longer of a rod for the 10. But just for your normal deep crankbait, I usually like to throw it on the Custom Speed Stick Magnum Rattle Trap rod. It is a 7/6 medium heavy. I love the action of it. It is a little bit stiff for a deep crankbait rod, but honestly I kind of like it. It makes me not swing on the fish. I know that because my tip is not quite as soft, I don't have as much forgiveness when it comes to setting the hook on a deep crank. So I just kind of retrain my mind to more like lean into those fish than to completely swing on them. Like, you shouldn't swing on a crankbait fish anyways, but I have a tendency to do that. And so I usually throw it on 10-pound, like I said, 10 or 12-pound Seaguar Abrazex with the BB1 Pro. And the BB1 Pro I have is on this rod right here. This is the brand new Custom Speed Stick. This here is the old one. As you can see, it is white and black. They kind of phased this look out here. They added a whole new grip, and this is the new Custom Speed Stick. 7'10" medium heavy crankbait rod. This is meant for deep cranking, and let me tell you, it absolutely launches baits, as seen here. I was constantly surprised this morning by how far this thing launches, even just a 5XD. Like, it's not that heavy of a bait. Like, it's bigger than a square bill for sure, but it's not that heavy of a bait. And so I was throwing this on, I think I put 15-pound Abrazex on here, because I'm gonna be throwing a chatterbait on this in Florida. But like I said, with 10, 12-pound, you're gonna get even more casting distance. And like I said, 6-4-1 is the gear ratio that I like to throw in this reel. And this rod here is quite a bit whippier. It's a 7'10" medium heavy, so it still has that medium heavy power, but it is a moderate fast tip. So it's a lot more whippy of a rod. I kind of liken it to the old Quantum KVD crankbait rod. I can say that now because KVD is with loose, but it definitely feels like that old rod series has a lot more forgiveness. So you get fooled a lot by trees and rocks. You think you have a fish and you kind of lean into them. But the good thing is I haven't lost a crankbait yet, because it doesn't allow me to dig the hooks into the rocks or the wood. So love this combo so far. Have caught a few fish on it. But circling back around to talk about location, It's really rock. That's what I'm talking about. Rock, maybe a little bit of like an edge of a tree line, but it has to be some kind of structure that warms up with that sun. Like I said, the conditions have to line up perfectly for those fish to slide up and start getting ready to spawn, and then you have this weather roll in and they're gonna bump off a little bit. They still wanna be in their feeding mood. They still wanna get ready for that spawn time of the year, but they're not gonna be as shallow because the water temperature has dropped, and because oftentimes with this wind, it just kind of beats up against the rocks all day. And I mean, think about it. If you were in like a swimming pool or a wave pool at a water park and it's just constantly slashing you up against the side of the pool, you're not going to be able to sit there. And so those fish kind of slide off a little bit deeper, and a great way to intercept them is with the deep crankbait. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I know I have a blast teaching you guys how to catch more fish. I'm gonna go out there and I'm gonna go throwing around some more deep crankbait after this video is done. I think the afternoon bite could be real good. But if you guys are not subscribed to this channel, please hit the subscribe button. It means so much to me to be able to teach you guys and bring you guys on my adventures. I'm about to leave for a whole month to go out to Alabama, to Florida, to Georgia. I'm just gonna go fishing, have a good time. I will be working 2 Major League Fishing events for videography. You guys will be seeing vlogs about that. I'm also starting a podcast soon, so make sure you guys are all up to date. 2020 is gonna be a huge year for this channel, and I'm already seeing the upward rise of this channel. So we'll see you guys on the next episode of Tyler's Drill Fishing. That's insane! That's insane! Oh my goodness! I totally thought I was snagged. I totally thought I was snagged. Wow! Wow! Look at this! That is crazy. I totally thought that I was snagged. I may have had a double on there because this fish did not. I must have had a double because that was fighting a lot harder than a singular fish. And I was trying to pop it off. That was nuts. Although maybe I was stuck and I popped it off and then this fish ate it. That's crazy. Alrighty, the 5XD gets it done on a little guy. We're gonna mark that baby, send her on back. Let's keep going. Not what you want right here, folks. I foul hooked a carp, and she big. Come on. All right. That's not ideal right there. All righty. See you, bud. Yuck.